Welcome back, everybody. At the previous video, we have finished up the adding of the student pages layout. And what we're going to do is that we're going to develop a helper class to input the data from adding the student page into a database. We're going to use the SQLite database as database management system. Let's start step 5. Let's start with creating a file for DBHelper Class. Click the right mouse button on the left panel and New, and select the Java class. A DBHelper class is not an Android component class. It's kind of a utility class to help us to save data. So we can just create a Java class, not an Android component class. I'll simply name it DBHelper. Using Android DB means using a local DB. Android DB is an Android device. We are going to use SQLite to handle the DB. A helper class that we're about to make is not necessarily required to handle the DB. However, with the class, we can easily select, insert, update, and delete data in other files, because it would handle other stuff like create and update database schema. So when it comes to database handling in apps, it's not a must-have class, but a very helpful class. How can we create the helpful class then? Let's extend a class called SQLiteOpenHelper. And I'll add a constant variable, which is a database underscore version containing a version. And let's set it for 1 now. Next, I'll add a constructor. This is what the constructor looks like in a helper class. In other class files, this helper class will be called before handling a database. When they call the helper class, they will call it by the constructor. As you can see, it tosses the database information up to its superclass. This student DB is a DB file name. All across our app, we will use this DB name. Of course, we can have multiple database tables in the DB. For our app, we use only one fixed database name, but if you want to use several database file names, we can change the DB name actively. And here, we pass the version variable to the superclass too. Because it's constant value, now we will send the value of 1. The superclass, SQLiteOpenHelper, that we extend is an abstract class, so there are some abstract methods that we will have to implement. Let's override the onCreate method and the onUpgrade method. When it comes to a DBHelper class, when these onCreate method and onUpgrade method will be triggered is very important. Once an application is installed and run, and then when this helper class is called at the first time, this onCreate method will be triggered. Only once. What that means is unless we uninstall the application, this onCreate will never run again. You may remember that the constructor tossed the version value to the superclass. Unlike onCreate, the onUpgrade method will be triggered whenever the version value changes. Now I believe you have the sense of how these methods work. Of course, it's up to you what kind of functions you add into the methods. However, generally, in the onCreate method, we will put some functions that we need only once. And as you can imagine, in the onUpgrade method, we implement codes that we need every time when a database changes or upgrades. So for example, functions like creating tables would be better in the onCreate method. And in onUpgrade method, functions associated with changing database schema would be better. So what we're going to do now is exactly the same as I just mentioned. Creating database process will go to onCreate method. On the other hand, updating database process will go to the onUpgrade method. So let's start with the onCreate method first. I'll add the SQL script to create tables. you can write the normal SQL's create script. I'll name the student information table as TB_student. This table will contain a student's detail information. So I'll add columns. I added ID column and its integer value and primary key, and I set it as auto increment, which means whenever a record is inserted, the ID's value will increase automatically. And other columns like name, which contains a student's name, email, which contains a student's email address, telephone column, and profile photo column. So the student table has 5 columns in it. You may think this SQL script looks a little bit different from the normal SQL script because unlike ID, other columns don't have data type. When it comes to a database, normally each column should define a data type. However, SQLite is designed for mobile devices, so it should be lighter than other server-side database systems. So we can use SQLite a little differently, and data types are not necessary in SQLite. So we have created the student table. And next, we're going to create the test grade table. Let's name it TB_grade. The ID column is the same as the student table: integer, primary key, and auto increment. This table will contain a student's test grade, so we need a student's ID to define whose grade it is. So I added the student_ID column containing the student table's ID. And subject name, test date, and grade columns. It should be enough for our application. We have created 2 tables that we need. Now, let's execute the creating scripts. And execute SQL function and pass the scripts as a parameter. We have finished onCreate method. Next, let's move to onUpgrade method. Let's imagine that after we create the tables in the onCreate method, if we add, change, or delete some columns, we need to accomplish it in this onUpgrade method. So if the parameter new version value equals the constant version value, database_version. If the version changed, I'll simply drop the old version's tables like this. And then I'll call onCreate method in order to create updated tables. Let's think through a developer's point of view. Once developers create tables, we might have typos or have to change some tables. Then usually developers would change the scripts in onCreate method. However, like I said earlier, no matter what you change in the onCreate method, it won't affect. Because if the onCreate method is already executed, it won't run again unless we uninstall and reinstall the app. So what we should do is, after changing some code in the onCreate method, update the constant version value. And then, because the version has been changed, the onUpgrade method will be triggered automatically, which means it will drop old tables and call the onCreate method to create new tables. Keep in mind, because we will delete the old tables, we're going to lose old data too. However, changing database schema usually happens while in a phase of developing or testing. then it would be okay to lose the wrong data. If we need to change database schema in a production phase, we need to add some data backup script before dropping old tables. But generally, the critical case like changing data schema won't happen in real life. And this is a tutorial video, so let's keep it this way. In this video, we have created a DBHelper class used all across our application. This is it for Step 5. I hope you enjoyed the video and wish to see you at the next video. Goodbye.